Hey there! This video is all about the Thypoch Simera-C cinema lenses. These are some really cool lenses that I'm really excited to share with all of you, and especially now that they are available in M-mount, which is what I'm holding here. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Thypoch, they're a sister company to DZO Film, which makes cinema lenses. You've probably heard of DZO, and a lot of the lenses they make, like the Vespid Primes, the Cata and Pictor Zooms, the Pavo Anamorphics, and their latest releases, which were the Arliss, which look absolutely amazing. I'd love to try them out. Now, DZO has been a big part of the independent filmmaking and videography community over the past several years with their fairly affordable cinema lenses. Now, prior to lenses like the Vespids from DZO and somewhat recent releases from other companies, a lot of filmmakers were adapting and modifying vintage lenses for video use. Now, Thypoch had a pretty small lineup of mostly M-mount rangefinder lenses, which are available now in some mirrorless mounts too. These lenses are designed for Leica's M-mount rangefinder cameras, and they've been pretty well received in the Leica community. Until the Simera-Cs, they had the 28, 35, and 50 millimeter lenses, and the Simera-Cs are actually a mix of Thypoch stills lenses and DZO's cinema lenses, so it's really exciting. Now, they do have a set of 5 lenses and were until now only available as E-mount. So when Thypoch approached me asking me if I wanted to test out and review their lenses, I didn't have an E-mount camera at the time, so eventually they told me that they're coming out with M-mount lenses, and I got really excited about that because M-mount lenses are highly adaptable and are very small, and that's a big point of why I love these lenses so much. So, disclaimer, first of all, Thypoch sent me these lenses to test out and review. They didn't pay me anything to make this video. They don't get to see this video before I post it. These lenses are actually demo lenses, and these will be sent back to Thypoch when I am done making this video. So I just want to be clear about how I got these lenses. All right, so all of these lenses in the set are full frame, and they are T1.5, so they're pretty fast. So of course, let's look at some sample footage, and I used these lenses on an engagement shoot that I shot on the Canon C80. And if you watch the review I did on the C80, I did mention that I was using some lenses I couldn't talk about yet. Well, these are those lenses. And I did mix the footage with these lenses with the Canon RF24-70, and I was able to mix them pretty well. So anyways, let's take a look at some shots with these 2 lenses on the C80. Well, I really enjoyed the image quality coming out of these lenses, and I also wanted to test them out on a different camera. So I did get to test this out with the Fuji XM5, which I'm currently working on a review for that. And I did some street video with the XM5 and the 35 millimeter. So take a look. So like I said, I do overall really like the image quality on these lenses. They are very pleasing. So let's take a look at skin tones with a side-by-side comparison. Now, this comparison here was shot on the Nikon Z6 III. Sorry about the focus being slightly off on the 75. It's really hard to focus on yourself with a manual focus lens at 75 millimeters. But I want to show off some skin tones and also take a look at the color matching here. I did copy the grade from one to the other so we could see any color differences. I think the 35 is slightly warmer than the 75, and I didn't do any technical tests on the colors of the different lenses since I only have 2 of the 5 lenses to test. Now, I would classify these lenses as modern vintage, which is starting to be a more common type of lens. And this category of lenses is having more and more competition. And what do I mean by modern vintage? Well, these are new lenses. They're not vintage or old. They're designed and manufactured recently. But these types of lenses are getting more and more popular as many manufacturers are now more than capable of making clean and clinical lenses. People are wanting lenses with some character. Now, usually character means flaws, but these lenses have the characteristics and the feel and look of older lenses, which is actually desirable for a lot of filmmakers and videographers. Now, as you probably know if you're watching this channel, you know I like to do technical deep dives. So let's take a look at these lenses on a more technical level now to see some of this. So for these technical tests, they were all done on the Canon R5C in 8K RAW. So the first test we want to look at here is going to be distortion and vignetting. First, we'll take a look at the 35mm lens, which definitely exhibits some barrel distortion. You can definitely see some vignetting or darkening in the corners. Now, stopping the lens down at T2, it does brighten up in the corners, and even more so at T2.8, but that's basically as good as the vignetting gets. So even at T4 and later, you're still getting the darkening in the corners, and you can see that the distortion is pretty consistent even at all of these different T-stops. Taking a look at the 75mm lens, you can definitely see that vignetting in the corners wide open. It improves at T2, it improves even more at T2.8, and it improves even slightly more at T4, where it's basically gone and it stays consistent going up from there. In terms of the distortion, I think this lens is a lot better corrected and a lot more flat without that barrel distortion from the 35. In terms of focus breathing, both of these lenses exhibit some focus breathing, kind of as you'd expect with a vintage or modern vintage lens. I definitely wanted to demonstrate the focus breathing on these two lenses, wide open at T1.5, going from close focus to infinity and back. Next, we'll talk about chromatic aberrations. And before I show you this test, please realize that this is basically a torture test for lenses. Now, these lenses are not apo or apochromatic, so we will expect to see some chromatic aberrations here. And as I'm showing you this, I'm just going to push the focus in and out with these lenses, and you'll also be able to see the focus breathing a little bit here too. Starting off by looking at the 35mm lens here, you can see the strong chromatic aberrations, and those are the purple and green fringing that are occurring before and after the plane of focus. And you can see as I rack focus in and out the different aberrations that are going on here, and they are pretty strong on the 35 wide open and at T2 and even here at T2.8. As we stop down the lens, we should see the chromatic aberrations decrease or the image quality increase. Here at T4, it's getting better. At 5.6, it is improved, but it is not completely gone. So now let's take a look here at the 75mm lens, and there's definitely strong chromatic aberrations just like there was on the 35 here wide open at 1.5. And stopping down, we should start to see it increase as we stop down more and more. And like I said, this is very tough on any lens looking at this high contrast scene between the trees and the sky. Here at T4, again, it's starting to get better and improve like it did with the 35. And lastly, at T5.6, it is much improved, but not completely gone. Next, let's talk about bokeh. And here's a test done in my studio here with some fairy lights just to show you the shape and characteristics of the bokeh. Very circular in the center, but as you move out towards the edges of the frame, you'll see it has that cat eye effect, which is not uncommon. Now, what's interesting here is as I rack the iris here and stop down the lens, the bokeh becomes more circular, and as you open up, it turns into more cat eye. Here's the 75mm lens, which exhibits a lot of the same characteristics of the 35. Again, pretty circular in the center and has that little bit of cat eye in the edges. And same thing going on here. When you stop down the lens, you'll see that the bokeh starts to become more circular and then more cat eye as you open it up. In terms of the actual images I was getting, I really love the bokeh out of this lens. It is really pleasing and really nice to look at. Both on the 35 and 75mm lens, I really like the way the lens is performed. Next, let's take a look at flaring, and I do this with a flashlight here in my studio to really force the lens and push it pretty hard. You can see there's quite a bit of veiling flare and ghosting flares and a lot of different colors and shapes and a lot of character with the flares, which is kind of what we want with these lenses. Here's the 75mm lens, and you can see that veiling flare come in as the light creeps in from the side. Again, like the 35, lots of character here, lots of different types and colors and shapes and stuff of the flares. And one thing I have to mention while out shooting is that it's very easy to get that veiling flare to wash over the image and wipe out a lot of contrast if you're not being careful. Next thing I want to talk about is close focus, which is a huge benefit of these lenses. So it goes from 9 inches on the 21mm lens up to 22 inches on the 75mm lens. So taking a look at these two lenses here, the 35mm at 1.5, again, this is going to be 18 inches. And then taking a look at the 75mm lens, it is 22 inches, which is also really good for that focal length. So great close focus performance. So in terms of the lenses that are available, there are 5 focal lengths, and they can be bought individually or as a set. So you have the 21, 28, 35, 50, and 75. They're all, like I said, T1.5 and full frame, and they cover an image circle of 43.2 millimeters. They also all have 16 aperture blades, which is awesome, and that's what really gives you that circular bokeh like I showed you before. And you could see, you know, how smooth the outside of the iris blades are when you have 16 aperture blades. They also have a 210-degree focus throw on all 5 lenses. They are fairly lightweight and small, and especially for full frame and T1.5. In terms of the front filters, they all have a front filter of 62 millimeters, except for the 75mm lens has a 67mm front filter. In terms of the build quality, I really like these lenses. They're all metal. They feel great. The focusing feels very smooth and accurate. I really do like it. And the iris as well. I wish the iris was a little bit stiffer, but if you had this mounted up on a camera with, you know, follow focus and stuff, it'd also work really well because of the gears on here. And like, let me just show you on the lens a little bit. Like I said, pretty good build quality all around, and they feel really nice to use, both to mount the lenses and actually focusing with them. They feel really nice. Now I want to take a few minutes to talk about M-mount because I really like M-mount and I'm starting to invest in it personally. And I know a lot of videographers and filmmakers and even photographers aren't super familiar with M-mount because it basically is been only for Leica M-mount rangefinder cameras, but they're very well adapted and very small. Now, I usually say that EF or PL are almost like a universal lens because you can mount that on pretty much any camera system. But M is pretty close too. Now you can adapt M to any camera with a mirrorless mount like Canon RF, Sony E, L mount, Nikon Z, etc. The flange distance on M mount is just slightly longer than the mirrorless mounts, so the adapters aren't very large, which is really cool. So in terms of adapters, you don't need anything super fancy for these because you're not trying to pass through electronic information. I've been investing in the Metabones adapters here. This one is the M2RF. And these are fairly inexpensive and decent build quality, and I bought a couple of these used. I'll leave links down below, of course, for these. Now, in terms of other ones out there that are inexpensive, I have these ones from TT Artisans that they sent me a while ago. I have the RF and the L mount, and you can just see how small the flange distance is because these adapters are so short. So let me get one of these mounted on here. Let's mount this on the Z6 III so I can sort of show you what's going on and how small these actually are. So here's my Z6 III. Let's put on the Metabones adapter. You can see how small that is. And let's mount up the 35. And the nice thing here is look at how small this package is. Now, if you've ever adapted EF or PL lenses, you know that the mount and the adapter can stick out quite a bit. This almost feels like a native lens because the adapter is so small. So as you can see, I love M-mount, very versatile and adaptable. And the nice thing here is, like, you know, if you are in the Sony ecosystem and you want to buy the E-mount versions of these, that's great. But if you're like me, or if you have multiple systems, you want to use it on different cameras, M-mount is almost universally adaptable, and the adapters aren't super expensive. So let's get into pricing, my conclusion, and final thoughts. So at the time of recording this video, these lenses aren't released yet, but right now they're showing they're going to ship for $950 or $4,300 for the set of 5, which I think is a pretty fair price. It's a little bit more expensive than the E-mount versions of this, but they are adaptable to pretty much every system, including E-mount, which I forgot to mention earlier. So I really like these lenses, and I'm personally considering picking up a few for myself because I love how small they are. They're T1.5. They have a really nice build quality. They're really nice to use. They're fun. They have a really pleasing image. They have great close focus. And like I said, the size of them are just so cool. I have just been personally more and more interested in getting smaller and lighter lenses. And I think a lot of the really good cinema lenses tend to be on the larger size. These are very small and light, like I said. So if you're looking for some small, fast, modern, vintage cinema lenses, definitely go check these out. Links down below. Huge thanks to Thypoch for letting me test these out. I really enjoyed them, and I kind of don't want to send them back. But hopefully you enjoy this. If you did, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.